From the 11 Alive studios, this is The Georgia Vote with Faith Jesse and Zach Merchant.
Well, there is no such thing as summer vacation in Georgia politics. This week we saw major developments in the race for governor and for Senate and the beginning of a special session of the state legislature.
That's right. Let's start with the race to November. The matchup for governor, that is all set. Republican Rick Jackson, a healthcare executive, will face Democrat Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former Atlanta mayor, in November's election. Jackson spent tens of millions of his own money on his own campaign. He finished second in the primary, but he had a big night in Tuesday's runoff. He defeated current Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones by 6 percentage points. Jackson ran as a political outsider, and he emphasized that during his victory party on Tuesday night.
When I announced our campaign, I said the political class protects itself, the media protects them, and lobbyists prop up the whole thing to protect their bottom line. It's a cartel, and I said, I'm coming to break it up. What? Well, tonight, we shattered it. Like I said then, I'm the only candidate who doesn't owe a thing to the political establishment. I don't care what special interests want, how much they beg, how much they give me. I can't be bought, and I won't back down. Now the primary's over and the general election begins. Georgia cannot afford to get this wrong. We face Keisha Lance Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta. Keisha Lance Bottoms did such a bad job as mayor, she didn't even run for re-election. She would be an absolute disaster for Georgia. When violence surged, families were afraid, businesses worried, and police officers needed support, Keisha Lance Bottoms turned her back on all of them. Keisha Lance Bottoms failed. She hopes Georgians forget what happened when she was in charge. I won't let them. To independents who love this state and want common sense, this campaign has a place for you. To the Democrats that are tired of high prices, rising costs, feel like they can't keep up, this campaign has a place for you. To every Republican who wants to keep Georgia strong, safe, and free, this campaign needs you.
Well, for Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, his political future right now, that's uncertain. His term as Lieutenant Governor, that ends in early 2027. Here's how he addressed his supporters on Tuesday once the race was called for Rick Jackson.
I want to thank my opponent and his team for running their race, and I also congratulate them as well. Look, I've always been one of those that I've never let politics define me as a person, and I've always believed that the sun will come up tomorrow, and you can rest assured of that, and that there is a life after politics.
Keisha Lance Bottoms, the Democratic nominee, wasted no time beginning her general election campaign. She hosted a healthcare event in Commerce, and she also visited the 11 Alive studio, where our Dan Kennedy talked with the former Atlanta mayor. We begin with her response to a question about whether she would include Republicans in her administration if she is elected governor.
You don't get anything done serving as mayor of Atlanta by just talking to people who voted for you. When I was mayor, I used to have to walk across the street to the Capitol to get things done. One of my biggest allies over at the state Capitol was the late Speaker of the House, David Ralston. We got a lot done together. Even worked with Governor Kemp on many issues. Those weren't the salacious things that got the headlines when we got things done together. It was always much more appealing to talk about things that we disagreed on. I don't have a problem working across the aisle. I've done it and will continue to do it. I'm not going to get ahead of my skis in terms of the makeup of my administration. We haven't gotten to that point yet, but I can tell you this is a very big tent, and there's room for everybody under this tent as long as they are focused on doing the right things by the people of this state.
A win for you in November would mean history. You would become the first black woman governor in the history of our country. I've seen interviews with you where you say, I'm not thinking about that, or I'm not focused on that. But is it in the back of your mind at all?
Actually, it's not. For me, it is much more personal. I've shared the story of my family going back at least 5 generations in the state to a plantation in Crawfordville, Georgia. Our family story, we can only trace back to once enslaved Betsy and Shepherd Peak on a plantation in Crawfordville. So for me, the legacy of where I am at this moment in time is not lost upon me. I can tell you, again, as I'm moving around the state, people want a strong leader. They aren't focused on my being a woman or my being a black woman, both of which I'm very proud of, but it's about the leadership that I bring to the table. And it's a reminder of how far we have come as a state.
And we will have much more on those runoff results, including from the Senate race, coming up in just a couple minutes.
That's right, but now it is time for our Politics Roundtable. And today we have Mark Roundtree, Republican strategist and pollster. He's also the founder of Landmark Communications and a veteran of Georgia campaigns and election. Val Sabak, Senior Managing Director at Denton's. She's also the former Executive Director of the Georgia House Democratic Caucus. And Rahul Bali, politics reporter at WABE 90.1 FM, also the co-chair of the Atlanta Press Club Debate Committee. Very busy week. I know a lot of us haven't gotten much sleep, but let's continue talking. I want to start with, I'm sorry, Rahul, that was not just pointed to you, but let's start with the outcome of this governor's race. Mark, I want to start with you. Some people say a big surprise with Rick Jackson coming out on top. What put him on top?
Well, it's interesting that both political parties, both the Republicans and the Democrats, chose a nominee that did not come from the legislature. So this is going to be a very different kind of election, I think, at the statewide level. As far as the Democrat candidate, Lance Bottoms, did not perform well in Metro Atlanta in her primary. She did better in the rest of the state. Now, the Republicans are sort of saying those who knew her best didn't vote for her. And in fact, in Fulton County, she only carried 48% of the vote versus 56 statewide in her primary. And among the Republicans, Rick Jackson was doing extremely well in early voting. In early voting, walk-in voting, advance voting, mail-in voting, but lost to Burt Jones on Election Day, probably because of the endorsement by Kemp.
And on the kind of other side of that equation, some may say that Rick Jackson's had to go to a runoff to get the nomination, whereas former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms, she was able to win outright on primary day against a pretty crowded field of other competitive Democrats. One other theme of this gubernatorial contest, now that we know who the nominees are, it's going to be money. Rick Jackson, everybody knows at this point, he spent a ton of money getting into this race and then securing the nomination. Now Keisha Lance Bottoms has to go up against that financial juggernaut. Val, from a Democrat's perspective, what does former Atlanta Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms need to do to be able to match that financial strength?
Yeah, look, $100 million is going to be tough for anybody to match. But I think she can go out and say this is the best chance that a Democrat has to win the governor's mansion. It's an open seat. Rick Jackson is kind of an unknown entity to some of these voters right now. I mean, we saw him spend a ton of money, and that was ultimately successful to introduce himself to voters. And I think Lance Bottoms has an opportunity. She has a record to stand on. She has name ID in the state. She's already traveled the state pretty extensively. I think she can build on that and convince donors to give money to her campaign.
Raul, go ahead.
And to Mark's point, much of the state doesn't know Mayor Bottoms. You know, I'm from Augusta. Most people in Augusta don't know her. What this race is really going to be about is each candidate defining themselves to the voters, and then the opposition trying to define who Mayor Bottoms is, who Rick Jackson is, because still most people don't know both of these people really well. So that's what I'm going to be watching for, how they trying to define themselves and each other.
And Raul, to your point, the reality is, though, she was mayor, she has a national name recognition, and she does have what some would consider a lot of dirty baggage under her, that she did not run again, and Republicans are going to come after that hard. But Raul, I want to ask you this, because I saw a theme in this interview that we just saw with Ms. Bottoms and then Rick Jackson's acceptance speech, where it was this story, his story from rags to riches, her story of being here from Atlanta, my family's here. How much will the storyline play into that trust for voters?
When I was on the trail with Rick Jackson, for example, And I would just talk to people like, you didn't know who this person was. What drew you to him? Yes, some people brought up some of the ads, but so many people brought up that message, him talking about growing up in Techwood Homes. You know, one of the stops was up in Cobb County. That whole story about driving the vehicle, driving the car because his mom couldn't, was actually up in that neck of the woods, he was telling the audience. So, and same with Mayor Bottoms. You're talking about multi-generations here. That does hit home with people and does bring voters out.
Mark, let's bring you in here. We've got about a minute left, but we shouldn't let this go without also talking about Lieutenant Governor Burt Jones, who came up short in this runoff. He was a big name in Georgia politics. He still is a big name in Georgia politics as well, but he didn't secure the nomination. What went wrong for Burt Jones in this runoff here?
I think that the Jones campaign from the beginning, and I think we've even talked about this at different points, the Jones campaign did not really grasp, I think, the enormity of the damage that was coming their way. And they didn't respond very quickly. Now, they were at a disadvantage originally because there was a lot of anonymous negative campaigning, and I think Jackson has never conceded that that was his work or his funding.
He has denied that.
He has denied that. I don't know anybody else that would have spent $10 million beating up Burt Jones unless it was somebody pretty close to Jackson. And it seems unlikely that Jackson wouldn't have known who that was, given the amount of money. But that all is sort of under the bridge. What's interesting to me is when we looked just a few minutes ago at Burt Jones' statement, he referred to his life after politics, which could have just been a slip, but he didn't say life after a campaign. He's never really been interested in the federal, in going to Washington. He's always been a state level guy, so he may have ended his electoral side.
And we're going to see for sure. It's still early days after election night. Our conversation is going to take a quick break, but we will be back with much more just after this. Well, the United States Senate matchup for November, it is now set. Democratic Senator Jon Ossoff will defend his seat against Republican Congressman Mike Collins.
That's right. Collins won the GOP runoff by a healthy margin, 56 to 44%. And Collins told supporters on the campaign trail and on election night that he feels it's imperative to reclaim the seat for the Republican Party.
I spoke with Derek Dooley a few minutes ago, and we had a really good conversation. I'm glad that he and spoke with the governor too. I'm glad they're on board. We all know what the mission is here, and I'm very thankful for that. But I want to thank Derek because he ran a spirited campaign, and I want to thank Governor Kemp for his leadership and his friendship over the years. You know, we're Republicans now. We're going to have some robust primaries out there. Sometimes we got some strong disagreements. But I can tell you one thing. Now we stand united around one mission. That's right. And y'all know what the mission is. It's to put a Republican in that seat and get rid of that Jon Ossoff in November. Return this seat to the people of Georgia.
Well, Derek Dooley, his opponent in that race, ran as a political outsider and had the endorsement of Governor Brian Kemp. But in the end, it wasn't enough to catch Mike Collins. Here's part of Dooley's speech to supporters after the race was called for Collins.
The people of Georgia, and I believe the people of America, feel the same way. They're sick of the careerism. They're sick of the corruption. They're sick of the inaction where we all blame each other and nothing gets done. And they're sick of people going up there more concerned about their own political career, more concerned about getting rich or famous than they are serving the people that elected them. And I hope, if anything, that our campaign, our Georgia First contract, can at least inspire more people to think how we think and start change leadership where we get back to what public service is all about. So thank you guys, and God bless you.
Senator Jon Ossoff's re-election effort, it begins with a big boost. According to his campaign, the senator raised more than $1 million on Wednesday alone. That adds to his campaign war chest of more than $32 million, according to his latest campaign finance disclosure form. Ossoff was quick to begin attacking his newly nominated opponent, lacing into him on MS Now with a string of criticisms, including this.
An election-denying extremist who is only a congressman because his daddy was a congressman and is a Trump puppet who will serve Donald Trump's needs and agenda mindlessly if he is elected to the United States Senate.
Back with panel now, and Val, I want to talk to you about what we just heard, fiery speech that complements a fiery statement that was sent out just moments after Collins was named this pick. Is this the energy that we're going to see from campaigns, and this is the energy that Democrats have been asking for?
Yes, I think that's the energy that we need to see. People nowadays, voters, they want to see candidates who are going to fight for them. And we've kind of seen that with Senator Ossoff coming out very strongly from the get-go. I think we're going to see a continuation of that.
Mark, for Republicans, this is obviously going to be a very expensive race. And I hate to keep talking about money on the panel, but politics is a big driver in campaigning here. John Ossoff, the incumbent senator, he has raised a lot of cash, and he has had the benefit, some would say, of not having to go through this primary runoff battle that the Republicans have had. Is fundraising going to be a challenge for the Republicans and for the Collins campaign here?
I don't think for this particular campaign, no. Any more than any other campaign would normally be. I think Senator Ossoff knows what the polls say, and that is that no poll has him over 50% of the vote and winning the election. There's not one. And any of the neutral quality pollsters. And that may change just to a little degree now that this sort of race has settled in. But I think this is going to be a very close race, and I think that the problem Ossoff is going to have is he's going to have Keisha Lance Bottoms dragging him down at the on the ticket with him. I think that is going to be a very real problem because of this one point, and that is that she has never been vetted in a policy sense in legislative level campaigns. She's always fought against city councilmen and in these nonpartisan races, but she will have a problem getting outside the extreme liberal box.
And you make a valid point that I wanted to ask you about, Rahul, in your reporting. What is that dynamic? What is the biggest issue that Ossoff has winning this race?
It's still a Republican state. Georgia is a Republican state. That's kind of the starting point. That's the challenge for him. But are these conditions that we're going into this election going to be the same kind of conditions that helps Joe Biden win in 2020, Ossoff win the first time, Warnock win and get re-election? And real quick on the money point, it does help that Rick Jackson's going to self-fund. That's also probably going to help with some of the fundraising here in the state.
As we talk about the election results, this is all happening also in a Georgia politics ecosystem. That is another big event going on right now. We're just a few days into a special session of the Georgia legislature. In one order of business, it came and then it went very quickly. On day one, Republicans deciding not to take up Governor Brian Kemp's request to redraw congressional district maps for 2028. We've got reaction from both sides of this issue. Here's what Democratic U.S. Senator Raphael Warnock said before the lawmakers' decision was announced, and Republican Georgia House Speaker John Burns as he announced this news.
So this idea that you can come to the South and allow partisan gerrymandering, but not allow a remedy that recognizes the complexity of race in our country is a partisan act that the Supreme Court made. And so I don't like gerrymandering. If it were left up to me, we'd get rid of it altogether. And I have a bill to do just that.
Changes to our district maps have the potential to impact every voter in Georgia, and they deserve the same thoughtful, fact-driven process that has always guided the House. That's why we look forward to holding joint reapportionment meetings to hear from voters in every corner of this state, ensuring every citizen of our state has an opportunity to make their voice heard in a fair and bipartisan environment.
This was a big surprise, I think, to a lot of folks. A lot of question marks about how this was going to play out. Now we know, and we found out pretty early on day one. Rahul, you were there for all of this under the Gold Dome. What happened here?
Leading up to it, the number of Republicans, and the best word I have is heartburn. There was concern about what this means politically going into the election. Going back to Senator Warnock's press conference, I asked him in that press conference, what does this mean for November? They're talking about this a way to get voters out, engage Democratic voters, that redistricting is still going to be, well, he hadn't said it because it hadn't been thrown out yet, but that this could be an issue in November. And as for Republicans, they're like, this is for 2028. It could wait.
Yeah, and Republicans still considering that as well, which was said under the Gold Dome. But for Democrats, this is seen as a win, at least for now, Val. But do Democrats lose a campaigning point? Because if this did happen, now they have, oh, look at Republicans, what they want to try to do to you. Republicans getting ahead of it. So what now for Democrats?
No, I think that they can still bring it up to say that they tried to do this because even though the House and the Senate Republicans said, hey, we're going to hold off on this, the governor and the lieutenant governor said, well, we think it should go ahead. So I think Democrats can still kind of bring that up to say, hey, and plus the headwinds are kind of already in the direction of Democrats anyways. And so to bring that up to be like, hey, look, they can't win an election, so they're going to just pick their voters instead, I think they can still bring it up.
And then Speaker John Burns said that they want to focus on Georgians and the realities that are facing them, Mark, right now, which is really money and what's in their pocket. Is this why? Do you think this is why Republicans decided to backtrack?
No, I think this discussion was always about the 2028, changing the 2028 election lines. It was never about 2026 under anybody's vocabulary, under anybody's proposal. So the question is, why are they reached the conclusion of why are we rushing in 2026, an election year, to do this when we're not even changing this year's lines? They're going to change the lines, but it'll happen in 2027, I think, when it's not an election year.
Rahul, we know you want to get in. 10 seconds to you before we're out of time.
Look what's still on the agenda in the special session, property taxes. You talk about affordability, that's what I'm watching now.
And you have a story coming out on that tomorrow,
Early next week.
All right, Rahul, thank you.
Thank you all. As always, this conversation could continue forever. Unfortunately, we're out of time for the panel right now, but stay with us. The Georgia Vote continues right after this. This week, Democratic voters chose their nominee for Fulton County Commission Chair.
That's right. Former Commissioner Mo Ivory won this week's primary runoff against incumbent Chairman Rob Pitts, and she'll be heavily favored to win in the general election in November because of how that district is made up. But this week, I asked Ivory about her priorities for Fulton County if she is elected as chair. What would you say is the biggest failure of Fulton County government right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think we have a crisis in 4 areas, which is what I've been saying throughout this campaign. We need to fix the jail, we need to fund the courts, we need to build hospitals in the South Fulton part of our county, and we need to protect elections. And those are my 4 key areas that I have continued to talk about over and over. So that will be my focus: fixing the jail, funding the courts, building hospitals, and protecting elections.
And during that conversation, Ivory also told me she plans to do a full audit of county finances if she is elected. She'll face Republican nominee Mark Tatum in November.
Stay with us. We are coming right back with more of the Georgia Vote after this. Well, thanks for watching us today.
Thank you so much. We hope to see you back here next Sunday at 11 for another edition of the Georgia Vote.